Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much for coming along to this morning's panel session about mixed-use development. We're at an interesting point in the cycle, and everyone's got different views on that, as you've probably heard in previous sessions. And there's certainly questions looming over economic and political direction across the globe. And against the backdrop of rising development costs and economic headwinds as we make our way through the year, the question of development viability and how and where to realise long-term value in development presents itself. So the plan today, between all of us, including you in the audience, is to dig in and interrogate the importance and value of the hotel component within a development, within a mixed-use development. So we very much would like to urge you to participate, hands up, pile in, wade in with questions at any point throughout the panel session, so that we can make this as productive for everyone as possible. Okay, so it's blindingly obvious to most people what constitutes a mixed-use development, and everyone will have their own particular personal view of that. And as such, it's very difficult to pigeonhole a precise definition. But we did find quite a good definition, which 4 American organizations put their head together and came up with. I've put it up on the screen, and I'll just quickly read it out. A real estate project with planned integration of some combination of retail, office, residential, hotel, recreation or other functions. It is pedestrian orientated and contains elements of a live, work, play environment. It maximizes space usage, has amenities and architectural expression, and tends to mitigate traffic and sprawl. Now, this might not accord with your own definitions of or concept of mixed-use development, but it's certainly a good starting point for our team of expert panelists who each focus on international development and projects. And I will let them introduce themselves, perhaps starting from your right with Hannes.
Good morning. First, I start to apologize immediately because of my voice. My voice is gone. So I made a big mistake. My wife shouted at me, and I tried to shout back. So, of course, I lost that argument. My name is Hannes Spanning. I'm a managing director and the head of projects, the chief project officer of Meininger Hotels. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks, Giles, also for inviting me, actually. Meininger is, we call it a hybrid hotel. And in that respect, I would like to use the word mixed use in that respect, because we have a mixed use guest structure in our hotels. Meininger is a clear 3-star quality hotel. We have 16 hotels at the moment within Europe, with some 3-star quality with some hostel features as well. So we're using some of the hostel features like multi-bedded as well as guest kitchen and so on, and embedded in our projects and in our hotels. At the moment, we have more than 2,000 rooms and 7,000 beds. So you can see already we have a ratio of about 3.5 beds per room in our properties. And we're planning to actually a heavy expansion program, because we just took over that company in 2013. We are planning to have 50 hotels in 2019, 2020. So we already signed in the last year another 8 hotels throughout Europe, which are under the construction. Some of them mixed use. I'm going to introduce one of the hotels then afterwards. That's Amsterdam Amstel Station. A little bit of background of Meininger as well. Our holding company is Holiday Break. That was a previously listed company in the UK Stock Exchange. Why am I mentioning that? Because they have also the largest student travel in the United Kingdom, NST, National Student Travel, next to many other companies. And our ultimate shareholder is Cox & Kings. Cox & Kings is a listed company on the Indian Stock Exchange, on the Bombay Stock Exchange, and on the Nifty. Some trading on the Luxembourg Stock Exchange as well. And it's the oldest travel agency in the world, established in 1758. So quite an old one. What is it? And just in finishing, what is Meininger? Also, Meininger, we are pure operator. So our speciality is in the technical assistance in building the hotel, and especially in running the hotel then afterwards. So why is it still that I'm going to tell you about mixed use? Because we are doing mixed use. We have some mixed use, or we are part of mixed use already with 2 of our hotels. And as I said, one before, Amsterdam, we are going to present a little bit later. That's from my side.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Pisani. I'm Senior Vice President for Development for Corinthia Hotels. We're a small luxury European brand, at the moment predominantly in Europe, but we have a number of hotels signed up which will see us move both east and west. In the last few years, we've seen more and more opportunities which do include a mixed-use element. In fact, most of what we're doing now will incorporate a lot of residential, and I hope to be able to contribute positively to this panel.
Oh, I'm next. Sorry, I just have to sit here. It's my bald head. It actually reflects the projector, I think. Actually, it's Paul's bald head. So my name is Dimitri Manakis. There is one quote that I usually use when I get on a panel, which one of my esteemed colleagues in the room wants me to use again. I've got possibly 2 of the worst things that can happen in life. I'm in timeshare. So I wanna confirm that I'm one of the few Greeks that actually pay taxes. So that's a positive thing. I work for RCI. RCI is part of the Wyndham Worldwide. RCI is the world's biggest timeshare exchange company, and we've been part of Wyndham for the last, I think, 10 years when Wyndham was actually established. We operate in the shared ownership field, and we've got fractional shared ownership, private residence clubs, and everything that has to do with alternative accommodations. Again, my presence here is to talk about timeshare, to talk about fractional ownership, to talk about alternative developments within a mixed-use project. So happy to hear more and happy to answer any questions you might have. So it could be worse. I have to say that again. I could be Greek and work for Volkswagen. So since I'm in Germany, so timeshare doesn't sound that bad. So okay, thank you.
Can you hear me? Or I think I've lost my voice as well, but it wasn't from. I'd never dare yell at my wife. I know I'd lose every time. My name's Eric Jafari. I'm Managing Director of Development for Seiko, the surface apartment company. In March of last year, we were recently acquired by Oak Tree Capital, which is a $100 billion company. And my focus is on the development side. Prior to joining Seiko, in July of last year, I was at Union Hanover, and we were the founders and creators of Urban Villa, which was Europe's first lifestyle apart hotel concept. Seiko's been around for 19 years, but the focus really is to scale Seiko over the course of the next 3 through leases, joint ventures, development, investment. So on and so forth. And in June of this year, we're launching our new lifestyle apart hotel product. That's it.
Great. Thank you all. Right. Against this backdrop of economic and geopolitical turbulence, are there any clear benefits for investors in hotel-led mixed use? And can I come to Hannes straight away, representing the mid-market? Is there any evidence for enhanced rental levels or tones in wider developments on the back of the hotel component within a scheme?
Thank you, Giles. Is it working? Yeah. Thanks, Giles. So first, let me also point out one thing maybe in that respect. And we have seen in Europe, especially since 2008, about the economic downturn. The interesting point is actually that even we have just been in that business, we as the managing team now at Mining for about 3 years in that respect, we have not seen any withdrawal actually from the hotel component in the mid-market segment at all. Because what's going to happen? People are still going to travel. What happened is, furthermore, that people started to downgrade from 5-star to 4-star, from 4-star to 3-star. So in our area, and especially coming now a little bit to mining hotels as well, we did not see any backdrop in that respect at all. Furthermore, we saw actually an increased interest in that one and let me outline a little bit from our perspective. We have 4 customer segments. We have school groups, which are booking very much in advance. So we have a lot of education and students travel going on within Europe, and that's not affected by any economic downturn at all. Secondly, we have family travel as well. That's also why we come with our multi-bedded rooms. Third one, we have lower budget business travelers, which in that respect also was not affected at all from the economic downturn. And last but not least, we have the backpackers and individual travelers, which are going to travel anyhow, even throughout an economic downturn. So in that respect, what we just saw, and I'm coming maybe later a little bit in the case study to that one, we just saw actually an increased interest, especially from the zoning planning, also from municipalities and from government, in actually when they're giving away public land to have a mixed-use development, and especially in that mixed-use development, and I know that some of my colleagues here are from the 4- and 5-star areas, we saw a heavy increase actually with respect to the mid-market segment, as looking into Paris, looking into Amsterdam and so on. This is the market also where we are going now with some mixed-use developments. There's a lot already in the 5- and the 4-star segment, but what you're actually lacking is the 3-star in the budget segment.
Right. Okay, but how about the knock-on effect for the other components, say office, retail occupiers within a scheme? I mean, is there a case to say that having a mid-market brand anchoring a scheme is going to enhance the rents that are being thrown out by the other components?
Of course. I mean, the one advantage as well, when you're having a mixed-use development, you have a hotel component into it. Also with a mid-market segment, what we are, you're actually one of the first tenants in a mixed-use development. That gives an enhanced kick and a kind of security. I always compare it already with our market segment in Meininger. We say we have 4 different customer segments. Using the school groups, that's a booking a year, 1.5 years in advance. That gives you quite some upside already for the rest of your customer segment for a kind of yielding whatever we are doing. I think that's pretty much the same also when you're using a mixed-use development in hotels and retail, and especially also residential areas. I mean, looking into Amsterdam, for example, I'm bringing that example again, there was a heavy downturn, especially with office market. There was about a 23% of office spaces were actually empty in the Netherlands. That actually, on the other hand, gave us some opportunities to take over some of the empty office spaces and convert it into hotels. That's what we have done with our first property, which is already operating. And that's what we are continuing to look actually in the future as well.
Great, thanks. And how about Paul, on the luxury end of the scale? So is there any evidence for residential premiums on a price per square foot within?
Well, from our experience, absolutely yes. A brand is all about perception, and if a brand is perceived correctly, it can certainly add value in terms of prices you receive per square meter. From our experience, a recent development in London, a 300-key luxury property in London, which had 12 super luxury apartments, of which we've sold 11, rendered our total investment cost 50% of what it originally was. So by selling the right product with the right brand at the right time, certainly it makes the numbers look a lot more interesting, and that's our experience so far. I really believe it is ultimately about selecting, the right brand match. But us as developers and brand owners, we have had that ability to do that all internally. But I've also seen, third-party investors speaking to many of the larger brands, and because of networks such as what Dimitri represents, certainly there is substantial value. I mean, ranging up to 30% from my experience in terms of additional value to the price received per square meter.
Okay, that's fantastic. And how integrated is that how integrated is that residential component within the hotel scheme?
Well, the hotel is the anchor, but the hotel is also in a position to provide, all the services required to the residential, be it anything, from housekeeping to security to concierge services, all the way to babysitting. So I think the hotel is perfectly poised to do that, and that's what we try to do.
Okay, great, thank you. And Dimitri, have you seen any innovations in your market, in resort market, to safeguard revenue performance?
It's interesting. From our perspective, what we see is 90% of the people we talk to, they actually talk about mixed developments, mixed-use developments. They're not talking about standalone, because I think if you are a new developer in the scheme, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, right? You want to have alternatives. That's one. Second, which is extremely interesting in terms of what is happening in Europe, especially today. You don't have brands competing anymore. You've got countries competing. When you've got Egypt losing 40%, 50% of their traffic, when you've got Turkey, TUI losing 60% of their traffic in Turkey. So it's not just TUI competing anymore. Is Egypt competing? Is Turkey? Is Spain? Which you're not going to be able to find one available bed in Spain this year in Portugal. You've got the golden visa. The golden visa in a mixed-use development. You've got people selling residences and passports in order to increase development, increase revenues. It's the airlift. The airlift has actually changed the landscape completely. You've got Ryanair pulling out of Lanzarote, 250,000 beds gone from that particular destination. So if you are a mixed-use developer, if you are a developer and you're thinking, where should I put my money? What is it about this destination versus the other? You have to actually think about all these components before you make a decision. In our perspective, what we see, it's all about lead generation. How many people you're going to see in this hotel a day that you can sell them, either a private residence, either a luxury real estate product or a mid-market real estate product. You need the leads, you need the bumps in beds in order to address them and say, you know what, it cost me $1,000 to bring this guy in from a marketing perspective, presence and brand value. I want to make some money out of him. So timeshare, from our experience, timeshare, private residence clubs and fractionals is exactly that. People are seeing all these customers and saying, you know what, I want to make some money out of this guy, because next year he's going to go somewhere else. Brand loyalty, is not actually guaranteed today. So I want to find a way to make some money. And the schemes that we represent, and Paul, he was right, is adds on to the proposition that a mixed-use development can offer.
Okay, thanks. But sticking with Dimitri for a moment, if I may. Can we quickly talk about the security component that a hotel might add to your sort of mixed-use development? There's obviously been some terrible occurrences throughout Europe, Paris, Tunisia, and beyond. How much does the hotel add to that security factor, or versus how much it may in fact present a target for things like terrorism?
Okay, I mean it's very tough to comment. It's like Jeff's, which is our CEO, hospital pass, as they say in rugby, on Trump. I'm Greek. I mean, which as you probably know, we're in the news for the refugee crisis that we're actually facing at the moment, right? And if you ask the average consumer, they might think that all the Greek islands are unsafe or they are flooded with refugees. Where I had a discussion with one of my colleagues this morning. It's actually 2 islands that are faced with a challenge. If you go to Paros, Mykonos, Santorini, they're is booming and they're extremely safe. But people's perception about security and safety could actually hurt the Greek tourism this year, because everybody thinks that we're flooded with Syrian refugees, which is not necessarily the case. So I've got 2 kids. Security plays a very important role when I choose my holiday destination, because I've got a lot of things to worry, including my wife shouting at me that the other 2 gentlemen, worry about. And the last thing I wanna kind of worry about is security. So, and the same from a business perspective. I mean, if you ask my assistant, she's safer booking me in a branded property because she knows that when I come back, I'm not going to yell at her, because she's going to say, what do you want? I booked you into a Wyndham Grand, so what's your problem? You know the story, you know the brand, you know kind of the experience that you're about to expect. So hotels, brands, necessarily, absolutely. They're very important. They're very important in people's decision-making. I think as security becoming a very critical component in decision-making when you book your holidays, brands and destinations will actually have to pay a lot of attention to it.
If I could just add something.
No.
And having an integrated, framework, an integrated component, I think makes the security element easier to address to some extent. And certainly if there's international know-how behind that, then, Dimitri's fears are addressed better, rather than having various standalone components, each trying to do their own thing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Eric, you've talked previously about the resilience of well-delivered lifestyle hotel-anchored ecosystems, and their ability to weather the storm in a downturn. Is that something you could elaborate on?
Yeah, sure. Listen, our focus is European gateway cities, so our angle and our focus is going to be a lot different than, for example, a resort product or even a high-end, very high-end product within the likes of London. The trend that we're seeing is that for the past, I'd say 30 years, it used to be that when you wanted to stay in a hotel and you traveled to India or you traveled to some other country, you'd stay with the brand because you didn't have a means by which to assess whether the hotel was good or not. The social media and the internet has transformed all that and has basically empowered the current consumer. And so as a result of that, what's happening is there's currently been what people call an anti-brand movement. The reality is it's not really anti-brand. It's people have moved from what they perceive as sterile brands into trying to find places, websites, venues, destinations where they can meet like-minded people. The ecosystem, from our perspective, is all that matters. And well-anchored projects, and to give you an example, examples of this would be Shoreditch House. If you go to Shoreditch House in London, Soho House put in a hotel which anchored the area, gave it credibility. Then they surrounded it with cool restaurants, Dirty Burger. Then they put in Concrete, which was a nightclub. Then they put in Pizza East. By the time they went out to attract the tenants, the office tenants, the tenants were willing to pay a premium because the tenants wanted to be part of that ecosystem. Another example, I'd like to mention, Zoku, Hans just came in. Zoku's coming in and going in right above WeWork in Amsterdam. By creating a venue whereby like-minded people can go, they'll pay a premium, and it'll give a stamp of approval for the area. Next thing you know, residences around the area will go up in value. When we put in Urban Villa in GWQ, which was Brentford, about a year ago, Brentford was considered quite a rough part of London. Within 3 months of us putting in our lifestyle hotel brand there, resi values went up by approximately 17% within a few months. So I think, whereas before people really just wanted that safety of brand, I think now it's not about how strong, from a long-term perspective, it's about what that brand is going to contribute or not contribute to the overall ethos and feel for the local community. And that can either, if you get the wrong brand, a lot of people will put in a budget brand because it's the easy way out. It can diminish the value of the local ecosystem.
Great, thank you. So part of that has got to do with, I suppose, an architectural factor as well, rather than just a cookie cutter sort of cheap brand covenant play, something a bit more interesting to introduce all the vitality to a scheme and the sort of longevity of that. Okay, great. Hannes, I wonder if we could move on to a little bit about your Amsterdam project. Okay.
Actually, what I would like to do is just giving you an example. I know my voice is giving you an example about the mixed-use development. Before I start, maybe, as I told you before, Mining Hotels we are pure operator and an expert in technical design of the hotel. However, we have also teamed up with a very strong partner at the moment. That's Foncier des Murs, which is part of Foncier de Région. which is one of the largest investors in hotels, actually, also in Europe, for a strategic partnership of up to 400 million euros investment. And that was actually one of the first projects we looked together, actually, for the acquisition of the hotel part. Unfortunately, that didn't work out in that respect. Still, we as a mining are going to operate that hotel here. This is a hotel development in Amsterdam Amstel Station. I don't know if you're aware about Amsterdam Amstel Station. It's in the southeastern part of Amsterdam. It's, I think it's the second largest train station in Amsterdam. The mixed use is an inner city development next to the Amstel station. As you can see here, it's a major hub. It's a major train station. It's also the international bus terminal, which, coming to that, what you just said, Giles, before, and Eric as well. For us, in the mid-market segment, also our people and also lower budget business traveler are very much focused on having a very central location. Public transportations as well our school groups. So for us, it was very, very important also being close to a central station or doing a train station. Here we have in total, it's a 20,000 square meter development, of which 40% the hotel section, the hotel portion was actually taking. Mining is going to operate 186 rooms with about 800 plus beds. Here again, our mixture with beds and rooms. We have 192 residential units there, also in the mid-market, as you can see here, with about 50 square meter. So it's not the luxury segment. That would actually contradict that what Eric just said before. So in the end, it has to be a synergy, actually, in that respect as well. And there's also some parking, because that's also quite heavily needed in Amsterdam. And some very, very small, actually, portion is for shops and retail in that respect. In the end, we have Profast. It's a very well-known developer in the Netherlands. They developed, I don't know if you have heard, maybe the Markthal, a very famous building in Rotterdam as well, together with the Powerhouse company. It's an architect which we hired and also as our interior architect. Mining as the tenant of the hotel. And then, as you can see here, you have some very large players in the Netherlands with multi-billion euros portfolios as the investors. You have Bouwinvest as the investor in the hotel. Vesteda is the investor in the apartments, Q-Park is the tenant for the parking. We started already, the construction started in December already. As you can see, it's a 100-meter high tower. It's a very large and high building, one of the highest buildings to become in Amsterdam. Completion is planned for December 2017. This is, I don't know if you're aware about Amsterdam Amstel Station. This is actually, that's the building, that's the whole station. Behind the rails of the train. And this is how it is going to look actually with the tower in place in end of 2017, beginning of 2018. As you can see here, we have from the Amstel station connection in orange here, very small portion also used in retail actually as this is going to be a passage so that people can freely and covered actually go from the Amstel station to the hotel and to the residences. We have the hotel lobby and the hotel on the first 6 floors then actually. And in one part, the entrance, and I'm coming to that one also, for the residential actually going through a core with the elevator through the hotels in the upper floors where finally the 192 apartments are going to be constructed. That's how it is going to look. Actually, that's the Mining hotel in an L shape. That's on the other side where the entrance of the apartments is going to be. And let me just very quickly, that's the retail, just also tell you why the benefit of a mixed use in that respect is actually given. First, it's a diversity of a mixed use leads to certain benefits, as I said. It's a very vibrant and lively area. So in the end, it attracts especially also the mid-market. If you're going somewhere to want peace and have spa and so on, you're in the wrong place there. We cater to school groups and so on. For us, it's a perfect location. Different functions, residential, mining, hotel, shops and parking, strengthen each other, especially if you combine them in your market. It would not work if you're putting luxury apartments there and having a mining hotel, or if you're putting a 5-star hotel and the residential units, what we're having there at that moment. Very important for us was the direct connection of the train and the metro and the tram and the bus. And it's a sustainable and effective use of limited space. And Giles, I hope you allow me, I'm just going immediately to the next point. And this is why actually also from a developer and investor side, it makes absolutely sense to have a mixed use development. First, and we see that even as an operator, we're seeing that more and more that the requirements of the urban planning is to have a mixed use development. So you can do whatever you want. If you want to get a public space somewhere, for example, we were bidding also in Paris for one project, which we won as well, or in Amsterdam here, there is a requirement. You have to have a mixed-use development. That's by the zoning planning by the municipality. So in that respect, it was between 30 and 50% for the hotel portion. We said, together with the developer, fine, we are taking 40% of the hotel space. It also makes very much sense to say there's as an advantage, because we, as the hotel tenant, were actually also the first ones to sign that contract. That means for the developer, he has, if he requires certain financing as well, he has a certain stability already from day one. We have a very strong, mining has a very strong rent coverage ratio. We have a 2.4 average rent coverage ratio around, across our group, which is an immense strong performance. That means he is a very safe tenant into it, which of course hence also has an impact again on the financing for the developer. The next one is also that like hotel lobby public areas on the ground floor is fine. Is good. If you want to have a certain premium on the residences and apartments, you're going more higher with the apartments, because then you have a better view as well. So in the end, finally with us, having us as mining as a hotel there and putting the residences then in the upper floor has a certain premium also for the development, for the investment in the second stage. And as already mentioned before by, I think it was Paul as well, you have advantages for residential, for the tenants to use also certain facilities of the hotel. Mining a hotel, there might be some bar, there might be no restaurant, because we're not doing restaurant, but using the bar and other facilities in that respect. So that's very quick from my side.
Just picking up on the lease point there, and recognising how important it was to anchor this scheme with a lease with a strong covenant. Are developer incentives any greater in a mixed-use scheme? Do you think sort of rent-free fit-outs versus in a standalone?
It's a good question. Of course, if it's the first one, you always might put a little bit more in the basket, in your shopping basket, even as a tenant. Yes, in the end, it was a little bit bigger, I think, in that respect from the rent-free period. And also in the flexibility to actually accommodate to a certain extent also our specific wishes with regards to layout of the hotel and so on. So short answer, yes, it has a little bit of an advantage, but in the end it's all about business. I mean, they're also not going beyond whatever their yield expectation is going to be.
Yeah. And are there any particular uses? I mean, obviously there's residential there and retail. I mean, are they your preferred alternative use classes to pair up with?
In that respect, it worked perfectly for us. As I said, I mean, it's in a mid-market segment as well, because that combines quite well in that location. So in the end, you only have to not only look at the macro location, but especially also at the micro location. And especially with our guest structure, having families, school groups and so on, we needed especially the access also to the public transportation there, which might be even a hindrance for certain other hotel operators in the 4 or 5 star segments, because it's too lively, it's too much pulsating and so on. For our purpose, it worked actually perfect, but I don't want to talk for Paul actually.
Great, yeah. Well, I'm actually going to quickly jump over to Dimitri, if that's okay, to quickly talk about one of your schemes in Portugal.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked about case studies and success stories, we've got a partner that works in Pine Cliffs in Portugal, and it's interesting because I've been working with them since the day they actually invented they started the property. And when I asked the guys, I said, what is your vision? What is that mixed-use development vision that you've got with Pine Cliffs? And they said, look, it's costing me a lot of money to bring every single client in the door, and I cannot afford to have anyone living without buying something from me. That was his. It was such a clear objective of what exactly he wanted. And I said, okay, so how are you guys going to do this? And he said, I'm going to have a hotel, so I'm going to cover my room nights. I'm going to have a high-end whole ownership proposition, so people who want something more affluent and they want something, you know, that they own, I'm going to have that as well. I'm going to stick a bit of timeshare, because I've got people who love the area. They don't want to buy a holiday home. They only holiday 2 weeks a year, so they're perfectly comfortable with timeshare. And I'm going to put a fractional scheme as well, which makes a lot of sense for people who want to have a deed. They want to have the security of the deed, but they cannot afford to buy a holiday home. And he ended up having what I call, and I hope he's not listening, what I call a real estate supermarket. So you go to Harrods and they say you can buy from a pin to a helicopter. I think that's the essence of the project today. You cannot afford, with the kind of money that it costing you to bring the people in, either in marketing, hiring people, brands, non-brands, ecosystem or non-ecosystem, is still costing you a lot of money to bring those clients in. So you cannot afford having those clients going without staying either loyal or buying something else from you. So in my world, every time I see a mixed-use developer, he says, how much money can I make out of my customer? It's not about RevPAR anymore if you're a mixed-use developer. It's, I've got a customer, I've got a captive audience, how much money can I make out of him? Because the guy, and it's the BMW. I mean, we're in Germany. I have to use BMW. I think Greeks, we're only allowed to buy BMWs, by the way, so we have to pay back the debt, so Mercedes and BMWs are the only things we're buying these days. So BMW, you've got an X1, X2, X3, X5, and X6. Why? Because you capture that guy when he's 25 and he's a millennial, and he buys an X1, and then when he's 60 and he's not a millennial anymore, he buys an X6. So you've got that captive audience, and it's all about continuous upgrades. You bring him in, you know, in your hotel, and then probably 10 years later, you've got the database, he buys an apartment from you. So Pine Cliffs, and again, I hope Carlos and his team are listening, that's exactly what they've done. They've been extremely successful, and in times of difficulties and downturn, they had alternatives. They had a lot of alternatives.
Yeah, and I was going to go on to ask quickly about seasonality and how that's managed in the timeshare market.
Again, I don't want to. This is a not sales pitch, unlike what you've done. This is not a sales pitch, but if you look when September 11 actually happened, Orlando was 20% occupancy. All the timeshare resorts in Orlando were 70%. Our occupancy from a timeshare perspective, outside of seasonality, is about 65 to 70. Why? Because people feel that they own a home. People feel that is a home away from home. And because of the particular, I mean, to be honest, millennials don't buy timeshare. I mean, let's be honest. Soho House, fantastic. They're becoming a brand as well. They're opening up now in New York. And so in our world, they're empty nesters. There are people who are retired. There are people who the kids have left home. Or there are people who are not stuck with seasonality. There are people who are willing to go off season because it's easier to get to, it's cheaper to get to. Again, remember that airlift scenario. EasyJet made Barcelona accessible and made the 5- and 4-star hotels in Barcelona more accessible. Why? Because people have disposable income, because they're not going to pay 250 euros to get to Barcelona anymore. They can get with 20, 30, 40, whatever it is. So seasonality in timeshare? No. We've beaten that urban myth years and years ago. And if you look at our timeshare resorts, you will not see a ghost town effect. They are actually open, and the lights are open during off-season.
Great, thank you.
Just to say something,
please, yeah.
Still on seasonality, I think whether it's budget or whether it's luxury, if you do have a mixed-use component, which does include, you know, a significant portion of residential, that also drives occupancy to the hotel, because aside from use of facilities, people living in the residential typically would have visitors, and the obvious place for these visitors to stay would be the hotel. So from our experience, we've seen a flattening of seasonality, because, you know, visitors would tend to come when the prices are right, and the prices are certainly more attractive when it's off season or low season. So there's a lot of synergy to be milked out of, you know, something which is very, very, very well thought out and planned. This is our experience so far.
Great, thank you. Eric, anything to add on the case studies front? No,
I don't.
No, fine, okay. Okay, welcome back. Okay, next question really. Are there any situations where the hospitality component of a scheme can outbid an alternative use? Eric?
Yeah. So at Oaktree, we're fortunate because Stephen and I both sit on a platform where we Access Cash, which owns other platforms. So Knightsbridge is a student housing platform, Pegasus is a care home platform, Anthology is a residential platform. And so what it provides us the ability to do when the opportunity presents itself is take an asset and compare it to resi use, care home use, student use. I think the one area that we're currently missing is offices, and I think Oaktree is in the process of resolving that. What's interesting is that it obviously depends on the location. And in some locations, hotels, specifically in London, can significantly outperform residential because it comes down to price per square foot. In London, especially with residential, you've got a social housing element. So if you're going to build 100, 200, 300 units, the local council is going to require you to allocate 30% of those units for social housing. And it's a lost leader. Whereas a hotel, a service department, an apart hotel, you don't have to allocate that social housing element. And so that gives you a very strong advantage to drive a far higher price per square foot. I think the second piece as well, and this is, this movement started about 5 years ago with the likes of Yotel, Citizen M, Motel One, Zed Hotels. People have come to realize that it's not about how big your unit is, it's about the perception of how big your unit is. That a 12 square meter room can feel larger and far more spacious than a 30 square meter room. And so that movement that now has been embraced by the institutional market has really changed the game for hotels. I wouldn't say for luxury, because space is still critical, but everything non-5-star. We just bought a scheme on Friday, and whereas a year ago, I'd say 3 years ago, we would have never thought of making a service apartment smaller than 32 square meters. Now, for the first time, we're going to deliver a scheme that has 21 square meter units. Because although the ADR might be lower, the EBITDA per square foot is higher. And there's a demand for it in places like London, where people are willing to live, sleep, drink, stay in a smaller unit. We saw that trend start in Japan 20 years ago, and it's made its way into places like London and New York.
Okay, thank you. And Dimitri, we've heard plenty about the shared economy and disruptors and so on in the conventional hotel and extended stay models. How have these advances affected your market?
We invented sharing economy. I mean, timeshare, that's exactly, I mean, if you analyze the word, that's exactly what it is. So we invented it. So I don't think Airbnb has the right to actually use what we've done about 45 years ago. And HappyMag, which is a Swiss German company, has 150,000 clients today, and they invented sharing economy in the Swiss Alps. If there's 7.2 billion, and to your point about all the different products and smaller units, there are 7.2 billion yesterday. Today is probably 7.3 billion people in the world. There is everybody. When people talk to me about sharing economy Airbnb, my answer is with 7.2 billion people in the world, with 250 million middle class in India, with an amazingly increasing middle class in China, with new markets coming, there's room for everybody. There is room for somebody who wants a 15 square meter hotel in London, and somebody who wants a high luxury 150 square meters apartment in Corinthia. Does it bother us? No. I think it's an interesting concept. I liked yesterday when I think the CEO of Hilton said, I think it was NH Hotels, he said, as long as it's regulated, as long as it's done properly, as long as it's done in the framework that every single other operator is working on, and they don't get preferential treatment only because they're hype, they are modern, they are, actually, they are not Facebook. My daughter told me is for 40-year-olds, so it's not about Facebook anymore. It's about Snapchat and Instagram and all these wonderful things that I now have on my phone, and I pretend to be a millennial myself. So if it is in the framework that the rest of us operate, that's fine. If they operate in a framework which they get preferential treatment only because they are hype, then I think every single operator has an issue.
It's interesting. You just mentioned something, and I think it's something that gets missed within the hotel community. Malcolm Gladwell did a TED Talk about 3 years ago. If you get a chance, it's on the topic of Coca-Cola and why Coca-Cola came out with 20 different Coca-Colas. And they did a study and realized that there's a large emergence of what they would call the micro-community. Little pockets of people that have certain tastes, and those tastes drive the consumer behavior. And yet, within the hotel community, until very recently, we saw a lot of hotels try to make the hotels as how can I say, offensive as possible. And the hotels that are succeeding, really succeeding, and driving the greatest RevPAR per square foot are the ones that are doing just the opposite. You know, Soho House is a prime example of that. They market it to the media community at the expense of everyone else. And as a result of that, all the media community are willing to pay $500, $600, $700 a night for a 22 square meter room that looks like an industrial shed with some nice British furniture. It's what that product means to them. And there are lots of little pockets. I mean, I heard the head of Design Hotels talk about people paying, thousands of pounds to stay in a 12 square meter monastery room because of what it meant to them spiritually. It's not about space. It's not about the old. It's really about what the meaning is associated with that specific product, whether it's a hotel, F&B experience. So micro communities is, and really it's the social media is what's driven a lot of this. People can find people that share the same taste from the other side of the world, whereas they probably thought they were maybe weird within their own community.
And it goes back to your ecosystem point earlier.
And come to Greece, we've got lots of monasteries, you can stay for free. We need as many monks as possible.
Excellent, thank you. Paul, just very quickly, can you talk about what the optimum mix between hotel and residential component, or even perhaps retail or other uses?
I think it really does vary from destination to destination. Looking at our own experience, we have some properties which incorporate a very small proportion of residential, 10% of the total number of keys. But at the same time, we're working on something in Dubai right now where the actual number of keys within the hotel will be 40% of the total number of keys. So it really does vary, I think, from market to market, and there's no such thing as optimum, certainly from our experience. I think, there are a number of points that one needs to look at, and certainly what else has happened in the area. From a location point of view, if it's a relatively new destination, then it really is about creating a destination. So you do want residential to be quite substantial, as well as everything else around it, entertainment, food and beverage, etc. So I really, certainly from our perspective as a luxury operator, we look at everything very much on a case-by-case basis, and we don't have a template that we roll out. It is about the numbers making sense. It is about ensuring that there are synergies between the various components, operating efficiencies, a long-term plan, because we're sitting here talking about why it's such a good idea, but many people haven't thought out what happens in 15 years' time when you have a tower which is hotel and residential and you need to renovate the hotel. What happens when the tower is a building site and you've got another 100 units which has people living inside? So, we've been very, I wouldn't say superficial, but we've touched on a number of points. But certainly from a legal structure point of view, from the condominium point of view, there's a lot that needs to be taken care of. So I don't think there's one shoe which will fit all, but it really has to be very specific to location and situation.
Great, thank you. And Hannes, are there any emerging trends, be it in the design, the technology, anything that you can point towards that we should look out for in mixed-use development, obviously with the hotel hat on?
Yeah, I mean, one very important factor, of course, is technology, as you mentioned already before. Because I mean, we even, especially with our guest structure, and I'm coming a little bit back to Dimitri. I'm not making a sales pitch because we don't need anything. We have our investors and so on. But we see it from our guest structure. Actually, we have lots of school kids and so on. The school kids start even with the age of 14 and so on. I mean, the first thing what they are doing is they're going to come in and everybody is grabbing the mobile phone and doing this. I mean, this is, where's the Wi-Fi? What about the social networks and so on and so forth? Nothing more bothering people if you have to then somewhere log on and maybe pay for the Wi-Fi or something like that. That's a complete no-go, which unfortunately in some even 4- or 5-star brands you still see to a large extent not hitting up. But this is a very critical thing, and this is also something which we are taking very seriously, because this is the one thing which is changing the fastest actually in that respect. IT components, social networks, social media, the connectivity and so on is something which, I'm 46 years old, but when those kids are coming in with the age of 14, 15, 16, 20, 25, 30 years, they're in a complete different virtual reality nowadays already. And they're used to it. I mean, like we had a very good session yesterday also about technology and so on here. I mean, you have to be on top of that, otherwise you're going to be the second. So this is one thing that's not only for the hotel sector, but I think also for mixed use. It's for shops, it's for retail, it's for apartments. This is one thing which you cannot lose out of your sight, because if it is not practical from an IT sector anymore, you will be number 2.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Do any of you have anything else to add in terms of emerging trends before we turn to the audience for a question or two?
I wouldn't say it's an emerging trend. I would just say a prediction. I think a lot of the very successful concepts are ones that have been able to integrate, develop mixed-use schemes have been, concepts where they put the likes of perhaps serviced offices below a hotel or retail below serviced office below a hotel. And I think a prediction will be that that the next big concept will be one that integrates all of them in a cohesive manner, as opposed to having, I mean, they're all right next to each other, yet they don't speak to one another. So you go into WeWork, you work, and at the end of the day, you go up to the hotel, and you could literally walk across the street. And I think the concept of the future will be one which is live, work, play, but that speaks to one another, where you'll be able to go downstairs and work and meet people, and they'll hold an event and the F&B, and it's all part of a one language community. Hard to control, hard to manage, but there are a lot of players who are already looking and doing this. WeWork now launching their We Live concept, and the premise is to basically make sure that people live, work, and play all within that one same envelope, so that they don't give up that community to someone else or the revenue thereof.
Yeah, and of course Soho House already doing that with Soho Works, which is
another
the challenge to WeWork. Yeah. Great. Thank you all. But any questions from the audience, please? Shall I pass over the microphone, or can you?
I'm walking towards you.
I'm sure we can hear.
You didn't have a fight with your wife, right? You haven't lost your voice. No, okay, good.
No, I just want to comment on what you said, the last sentence. There is a project like this right now, which was designed by WATG, by John Goldwyn and his team. It's in Poland, Palace Park, and it's exactly what you said. It's going to be the first of its kind, which integrated lifestyle community with live, work, and play, with all the facilities, number of amenities and facilities that hardly can be found anywhere in the world in one place. And it was to take a look into this. It's very advanced development right now.
Great. Thank you for that.
Also, a small comment. I live in Chance, I live in Malta, in such a place which is called Porto Maso, and is said to be one of the most successful mixed-use developments, with a Hilton hotel, a lot of shops, residential, and like this. There were 2 or 3 points that have not been mentioned. Number one, there is a VAT benefit for investors who then rent out the apartment to hotel or whatever. Number two, also the catering and restaurants and like that must fit to the target group. Because if you have drunk people in a pub that vomit on the streets, you will not sell apartments. But if you have a nice bar and elegant restaurants where those people who live like to go, that's very good. And number 3, this is something I saw where, with a friend, what should be avoided in this Porto Tommaso complex, they have a U-form. Now what happens is that I see out of my window all the time which girlfriend one of my best friends has. And you know all the people, you look there and you are permanently like in a theater on the stage. And such apartments must be also fit to the effect that people know each other. So therefore I agree with the sentence that that has to be individually and has to be an integrated concept.
Great, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Yes, please.
If you enter into an agreement as a tenant going into a major mixed-use development, and the subsequent tenants that join in are not conducive to your brand, do you have the opportunity to exit, or do you suffer for 5 or 10 years for the length of your lease? How do you ensure that the other tenants going into a major billion-dollar mixed-use development are conducive to what you're trying to do?
Very good point, thank you. I'll pass that over to Hannes, if I may, just because he's got good line of experience.
Thank you. Yes, it's a good point, actually, very, very good point. I mean, what we are doing, and I'm just using that Amsterdam example again, is for us it was very easy. Of course, you have to look into the entire concept, and it's a valid point. It's not only that the type of apartments has to fit to your hotel, but it also needs to be completed at the same time, because you don't want to open a hotel and then having a 2-year construction area whatsoever right in front of your hotel. So in the end, yes, you need to be part very early, even as a tenant, before you're signing the rental contract. That's from our experience as well. You have to look through the entire project, and if necessary, also make your claims into it, because it also has to be very clear that there cannot be a competitor then being put in maybe some other floors of the building into that one. Did that answer a bit of your question? I mean, otherwise, how else to protect yourself? You're absolutely right. I mean, we are not a concept that we have saying we're going to have a nightclub somewhere there, because we have school groups in there. So we also need to make very clear and very sure that there is no whatever night bars and so on accepted in that mixed-use development, because it would absolutely contradict with our guest clientele.
Anyone else? No? Well, thank you very much to all of you for your contribution and for listening, and especially to the panelists. And I hope you'll join me in giving them a round of applause.